came to Australia just a few days before I turned 21. I left Vietnam a few months before that. One day I came home from university in the afternoon and my mother said, "You're going." Back then, for people to leave Vietnam, it was a criminal offence. People would be put in jail.
I guess I couldn't tell you a time when I hadn't decided to leave Ireland. I guess really emigration is almost in the Irish DNA. You know, we grew up with stories of my mum's experience in the United States in the late 40s and early 50s, and that we lived in Dublin, we had no family in Dublin. Most of my class, probably 90% of my year 12 class would have emigrated, either to United Kingdom, United States, very few to Australia, but mostly to the United States and Great Britain. But I was one of 9 kids, so we always felt there's a good chance that some of us will emigrate.
I came to Australia in 2007 as an international student. In the beginning, it was very tough because in my generation, most people were the only child in the family, including myself. So I didn't have sibling supports, and most of my friends or classmates was still in China, and it was all by myself, and it was quite difficult to settle down. And then I fall into this circle of submit job applications and then got rejected. And that process was also very painful.
We came to Australia in July 2022. I came with my wife and my 4-year-old son. We arrived in Melbourne. The reason why we decided to come to Australia was after living abroad, outside Spain for almost a decade, there was a series of happenings. For example, there was COVID, there was the birth of our son. It almost happened at the same time. And it was a period of time where we lived for almost 10 years in the Gulf. So we decided to make a change, and Australia was a great candidate for us.
It's actually a little small charm here. The charm is for blessing. So my grandma actually gave this little subject to me when she was still alive. That was given as a gift when I left my hometown. Coming to Australia was very expensive. So I wasn't sure if it was a right choice. But now I felt very lucky that this somehow, I wouldn't say it's a choice made by me, but somehow, lots of happenings in my life actually pushed me onto this path. And I think I was very lucky. I think it's just something that it's a gift.
I came to Australia in 1956 as a 7-year-old. We travelled by ocean liner to Australia through the Suez Canal. And initially we were sponsored by people my parents knew, and we lived with them in Heidelberg, and my parents worked at the Olympic Village for the 1956 Olympic Games. Then they bought a house in Coburg, and I grew up in Coburg from the time I was 7 till the time I left home at 19.
The reason I came was I wanted to leave South Africa. I believe that if you looked at the history of Africa, when there was a change of power, there was major disruption to society and there was lots of violence, and I believe that would happen in South Africa at some stage, and I felt that I would leave before that happened.
I come to Australia in 1987 as a tourist. I was here traveling for a year. I did meet my husband here, and then I went home for a year, and then I came back, and I sort of settled down here then. He tried that year to live in Sweden, and it did not work out for him.
Originally, I actually came for my dad's work, so he's a doctor, and he went out to the country. I think my family came to Australia because they always wanted to live and work somewhere else. Australia just presented great opportunities. My dad was always interested in working overseas. I think Australia at the time had a shortage of doctors, particularly in the country, and he took the opportunity, and clearly since they're still here and he's still working here, they love it here. When I came to Australia, I was 17 years old. So puberty hitting me hard. I didn't really enjoy coming here, which I think was because I was 17, I was very settled at home. It was the formative years. And yeah, I think it's quite frank to say that I didn't have a great time to begin with, simply because I was a teenager and I didn't particularly want to move. But I think, especially once I finished high school and then moved to Melbourne for university, I think that's when I really fell in love, especially with Melbourne and with Australia in general.
If somebody would have probably told me before I'd emigrated how difficult it was going to be, I may never have done it, because it's been tough, as it is tough for everybody. I'm really glad I've come, because it's great for my kids to have a better education, to be in a better environment. I think I'm living in a better environment than I was in the UK, but it is difficult because you miss family, you miss friends.
I think they saw it as the land of opportunity. Australia House put out a lot of leaflets, pamphlets promoting Australia, and one of the things that attracted them was free education, which they soon discovered was not free, because you had to pay for this, that and every other thing. I think my father saw it as an opportunity to have a career. I think my mother was extremely lonely. It was difficult for me as a child because my mother was Catholic and my father was Church of England, and 1950s Melbourne was not a good place to be if you were not either one or the other.
The family arrived in Australia, sitting Manford in Fremantle in September 1949. From there we went to Bonegilla camp, which used to be a military place, I think. I was 6 when I came. And look, my first language was German, because the family has significant German origins.
For most people who embarked on a journey like mine, destination was unknown. Until I arrived in Australia, which is 3 months after I left, my parents didn't know anything. They thought that I perished at sea or was taken by the pirates or something.
I would not have fitted in had I gone back to the UK in my 20s, because I was a different person. I was actually more Australian by then, and I would not have fitted in. But I still get the odd moments where I feel I just don't belong here and I don't belong there. I'm 75 now, and it just seems ridiculous to feel those kinds of feelings. So for people who come from other language backgrounds, I think it must be far more traumatic. And the fact that those feelings haven't left me, it must be much harder for people who come from a different culture and a different language background.
I spoke English, but it was still a steep learning curve. They put me back a year in school simply so I could pick up on the language, so that was very helpful. Oh, I love coming to the library. We hang out at the library all the time. We particularly go out to Eltham because they run a German story time out there. So that's how I first started coming out to Eltham, because the program they have supports the language development of my 2 sons, and it's really important to me that they learn the language.
Potentially, I was thinking if I wanted to live in this country, and at least its immigration system would support me, compared to America or some European countries. It's quite difficult.
Best decision I ever made. I feel Australian, but you can't take the South African out of you. It's there.
If you migrate as a child, it's not your decision. Your life is turned around by the decision your parents make. You have no say in it whatsoever. But I've built a life here, and I'm not leaving Australia. This is my homeland now. Not my birthland, but it's my homeland.
My name is Mona Harson, and I was born in Romania in 1966. I came to Australia in 1991 at the age of 25. When I was a child, Romania was a communist country, so obviously it was behind the Iron Curtain, as we refer to that regime. Because of that, there were a lot of restrictions in schools and at work. My parents always had to be careful what they said, not to say anything against the Communist Party or anything that could be held against them and punished with jail. And that also was the case with the students at school. So we had to be very, very careful what we said. So it was one thing to think, and it was another thing to speak. I realized that it was still the communists that were leading the country. And then I decided with my parents that this is it. It's not going to change soon. And we are too tired of waiting for a second chance and a different life. And it was time to go. So today I brought with me a specific item which was made by my paternal grandmother. We came from Transylvania, basically the center of Transylvania, which is a region of Romania. That region I was born in, it's called Tarnave, but in Romania it's Târnave. There are two rivers. One is the big Tarnava and the other one is the small Tarnava, and they are very close to each other. And around that region, people dress with this particular, this is a female costume. My grandma has produced everything that was needed to make this traditional costume. She was weaving the actual material, and then she embroidered it. And she made the lace of the sleeves, and then this apron. It's actually a double apron. One is worn in the front and one is worn at the back. So this is made of wool. She also crocheted the lace here, and then she used beads to bring some features, to bring them up, to make them more visible. These costumes connect back to my country because they still keep my grandmother alive, as it happens with many other migrants. There is something about this country that really makes you fall in love with it. I'm not sure what happens, and maybe it's the people. The people are very friendly, and when you travel around, the natural habitats that you encounter are absolutely spectacular, and I've never looked back.
Hello, my name is Madigo, and I was born in Hwange in Zimbabwe. Hwange is a coal mining town in the Zambezi Valley, and that is 100 kilometers away from where my dad grew up. My dad grew up having the Victoria Falls as his backyard, and that is the source of my origin. Came to Australia would be 20 years ago now, and I was 21. Kind of glad someone's doing the maths to calculate how old I am now. But that said, when I came here, for me it was a stage of I'd never left home. I'd always lived in my home country, lived with mum and dad, to the point where I'd done studies at home. Most people will go to uni and live on campus. I'd never had that experience. I literally drove from home going to uni, and I was looking for an opportunity to leave home and just go somewhere else. So I came in here, working for this Swiss company, and came back, and I guess I never left. On a good day, I would have had a stovetop and I would have whipped up a meal for you guys. Why? Because in our culture, we have a saying that says, ukudla kuqinisa ubuhlobo, and that means food strengthens relationships. I actually now am proud to say I call two continents home, Australia and Africa.
The family, I think, has been reasonably successful in coming to Australia.
It's been a great change for good, and this landscape, this environment is lovely, and the weather, even though it's a bit rainy for us and a bit cold, but we really enjoy it.
The weather is very important for me. I always go home, so whichever way I fly, I always go back home. So I haven't come to being more Australian or more Swedish. I'm just in the middle, I guess.
When I first came to Australia, there was no culture shock. People thought I was a little bit oddity, but in a good sense. People were interested. People were very, very friendly. I embraced it. Once I looked at Australia, I thought, yeah, Australia was probably the perfect fit for me.
Australia and I had a bit of a rocky start, but I really fell in love with the country as I got to know more and more of it and more of the people. And that's why I'm still here almost 20 years later, and why I don't think I'll be leaving anytime soon.
I am a citizen and I have been here 17 years. but I will never not stop feeling English, and I will always be an immigrant, and I know that. So that's quite a strange thing to deal with, but it's like the same as everybody else. You move for a better life.